title was not a word anyone used lightly. It wasn't just a name or a label. It carried weight, a promise of something greater, something earned through trials most would never dare face. For one person, it became a beacon, a singular truth that reshaped their world. This is the story of how they came to bear it. They were born in a small coastal town where the air always smelled of salt and ambition was as scarce as fresh water in a drought. Their parents were workers, hands rough from years of labor in the fisheries, their lives a cycle of dawn-to-dusk toil. The child, named Alex by a mother who dreamed of far-off places, grew up with the sound of waves as a constant companion. School was a cramped building with peeling paint, where teachers spoke of opportunities beyond the horizon but never explained how to reach them. Alex listened, though, and something in those words stuck, a spark that refused to be drowned by the monotony of their surroundings. By 16, Alex was different. Not in the way that draws attention, like a loud voice or a bold stride, but in the quiet resolve that burned behind their eyes. They read books borrowed from a library 2 towns over, pages worn from being passed between hands hungry for knowledge. History, science, philosophy. Alex devoured them all, piecing together a world far bigger than the one they'd been born into. They didn't talk about it much. Words felt too small for the ideas growing inside them. But their mother noticed. She'd see Alex sitting by the window at night, staring at the stars, and she'd wonder what they were chasing. The turning point came in their 17th year. A stranger arrived in town, a woman named Clara, who carried herself like she'd seen more of the world than anyone else there ever would. She wasn't loud or flashy, but her presence commanded attention, her voice steady, her eyes sharp with purpose. She was there to scout talent for a program, one that promised to take young minds and mold them into something extraordinary. It wasn't charity, it was a test. Clara spoke of a place where ideas could change the course of history, where those who earned it could claim a title that meant something real. She called it the Academy. Alex heard her speak at the town hall, standing at the back of a crowd that murmured skepticism. The townsfolk didn't trust outsiders, especially ones with big promises. But Alex felt something shift inside them, like a door creaking open. Clara's words weren't just ideas. They were a challenge, a dare to step beyond the life they'd been given. When she finished, Alex approached her, heart pounding but voice steady, and asked what it took to be chosen. Clara looked them over, not with pity, but with a calculating gaze, and said, "Prove you're worth it." The process wasn't easy. Alex spent weeks preparing, studying late into the night, teaching themselves concepts they'd never been taught in school. They wrote essays, solved problems Clara sent by mail, and faced questions that felt like traps designed to expose weakness. But Alex didn't falter. Each task was a step closer to something they couldn't yet name, but knew they needed. When the letter came, sealed with a crest Alex didn't recognize, it held a single word: accepted. The Academy was nothing like they'd imagined. It wasn't a gleaming campus or a place of comfort. It was a sprawling complex in a city they'd never heard of, all concrete and glass, where every hallway seemed to hum with purpose. The students weren't just bright, they were relentless. Each one had fought to be there, and the air was thick with the weight of their ambitions. Alex, still carrying the salt of their hometown in their veins, felt out of place at first. But they adapted, learning to move with the rhythm of a place that demanded everything. The first year was brutal. The instructors didn't coddle, they dissected. Every idea Alex presented was torn apart, rebuilt, torn apart again. They learned to think faster, argue sharper, see patterns where others saw chaos. They studied physics, literature, ethics, mathematics, subjects woven together in ways that made their heads spin. The Academy wasn't about memorizing facts. It was about forging minds that could withstand pressure, that could create something new from the raw material of the world. Alex thrived, not because they were the smartest, but because they refused to quit. By the second year, Alex had caught the attention of the council, the group that oversaw the Academy. They weren't teachers. They were something else. Figures who spoke rarely, but carried authority that silenced rooms. One of them, a man named Torin, took an interest in Alex. He was old, His face lined with years of decisions most would never understand, but his eyes were sharp as a blade. He didn't praise Alex, he challenged them. "You're here because you're capable," he said once, "but capability isn't enough. What will you do with it?" That question became Alex's compass. They began to see the academy not as a destination but as a forge. The title, that elusive honor Clara had spoken of, wasn't just a reward, it was a responsibility. No one explained what it meant, not fully, but Alex pieced it together from fragments. The title was given to those who could carry the weight of progress, who could lead without faltering, who could face the unknown and not blink. It wasn't about fame or power, it was about becoming something the world needed. The trials began in their third year. They weren't announced, and they weren't fair. One day, Alex was handed a problem, a simulation of a city on the brink of collapse, with variables so complex it seemed impossible to solve. They had 3 days, no sleep, and a team of peers who didn't trust each other. Alex took the lead, not by shouting but by listening, then deciding. They failed the first time and the second, but by the third, they found a way to stabilize the system. The instructors didn't smile, they just nodded and moved on. Other trials followed, each one harder than the last. Some tested intellect, others endurance, others morality. Alex faced choices where every option seemed wrong, where saving one life meant risking 10 others. They learned to live with doubt, to make decisions even when certainty was impossible. They didn't always win, but they always learned. And through it all, the title loomed, not as a prize but as a question. Were they enough? The final trial came without warning. Alex was summoned to a room they'd never seen, deep within the academy's core. Torrin was there, along with 2 others from the council. They didn't speak at first, just handed Alex a dossier. Inside was a problem unlike any before, a real-world crisis, unfolding in a distant region, where resources were scarce and lives hung in the balance. This wasn't a simulation. "You have 1 hour," Torrin said. "Tell us what to do." Alex's mind raced. They read the dossier, cross-referenced data, weighed options. The numbers were unforgiving. Not everyone could be saved. They made their choice, wrote their plan, and presented it. The council listened in silence. When Alex finished, Torrin stood, looked them in the eye, and said, "You've earned it." No ceremony, no fanfare, just those words and a nod toward the door. The title wasn't a badge or a certificate. It was a charge, a role that came with no clear path but endless expectation. Alex left the academy not as a hero, but as someone who understood the cost of leading. They returned to the world, not to their small town but to a broader stage, where crises waited and solutions weren't guaranteed. They carried the title quietly, not as a boast but as a reminder of what they'd promised to become. Years passed, and Alex's name began to appear in whispers, decisions that averted disasters, ideas that shifted how people thought. They didn't seek recognition, they sought results. The title wasn't something they spoke of, but it was there in every choice they made, every life they touched. The world didn't always understand, but it felt the impact. And so, the story of Alex and the title became a thread in the larger tapestry of human progress, not a legend, but a truth. It was proof that one person, shaped by will and tempered by trial, could carry something as heavy as a name and make it mean something more.